This is Nancy Hobel-Heinrich. Looks like it's time to get started. I'm from Knowledge Motifs in San Mateo, California, and also the project manager for the Data Management Training Clearinghouse. Along with, I'm really happy to welcome everyone along with my cohort, Rowena Davis from the Belmont Forum. Really glad to have you all here. I don't know if you can see the screen. You'll see that we've got the agenda and meeting notes document up, and if you have not had a chance to sign in below here, please do so. We'd love to keep a record of who's here and be able to be in touch if need be. So again, welcome. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes here to note that this meeting will be recorded or is being recorded. So you'll be able to listen to it later or send it on to people later, people who are interested. And so the webinar is sponsored by the ESIP Data Management Training Clearinghouse Working Group, which is, I'm co-chair of that, and one of the products is the Data Management Training Clearinghouse, along with the Belmont Forum's e-infrastructures and data management project, of which Rowena is the project coordinator. So our goals today for the webinar are threefold: to develop awareness and understanding of the Belmont Forum's data skills curricula framework. And so we've got Vicki Lucas here to give us a good explanation of that framework, and what it is and how it got started and so on. We'll have a few minutes to talk about the Data Management Training Clearinghouse. So that's one of the goals as well, is to develop that awareness and increase participation and the utility or usefulness of that clearinghouse. And then also really start to identify topics for further discussion that are related to implementation of the data skills curricula framework in collaboration with the clearinghouse. So those are the goals that we've got for the workshop today. And what I'm going to do now is basically send, unless people have any questions about that, I guess we ask people to mute unless you've got a question, then go ahead and unmute and ask. You can also, excuse me, send notes through chat to either everyone or to myself or to Rowena to ask for you if you're interested, if you are not able to or do not want to speak up. So we will go with that. And so basically I'm going to pass it on to Rowena to introduce Vicki.
Hi everyone, and thank you all for making the time for this. If you are, some of you are already familiar with the Belmont Forum e-infrastructures and data management project, but if you're not, I'm going to go through a very quick run through of the background on that. Basically, the Belmont Forum is a consortium of over 25 international science funding agencies dedicated to collaborative transdisciplinary environmental research across international boundaries and with international teams. Back when it was formed, they decided early that a priority need was open data access and sharing among these international research teams. So in 2013, they started to develop a scoping phase to figure out what exactly would be needed to achieve the goals of a more cohesive and federated international sharing plan. 14 member countries joined that initial phase, and they in 2015, they released a final report that gave an output in basically 4 major kind of prongs we called action themes. And one of those the first one was adopting data principles, which the Belmont Forum principles did. They adopted the data principles and policy in 2015 at their plenary meeting. And those actually resemble very closely the FAIR principles that a lot of you are familiar with today, and that are gaining a lot of traction among a lot of data groups. Other action themes included a coordinated approach to data planning in terms of planning templates, common requirements. One was developing further research to identify challenges and best practices, and as a matter of fact, call, a Belmont Forum call just was released on April 16th that will give Belmont Forum researchers the opportunity to delve deeper into their infrastructure challenges and look at that kind of specifically in conjunction with the research that they're doing. And the fourth action theme was to develop capacity building and to kind of build common skills across researchers. NERC, one of our, the National Environmental Research Council of the UK and an original project co-lead, sponsored Vicki Lucas of the Institute for Environmental Analytics as the data champion to kind of put together skills that were needed and develop a training curricula framework. So some of you have met Vicki Lucas, and she will talk for a few minutes about the process that we undertook as part of the e-infrastructures and data management project, and then give some details on the results, and then we'll move on to where we are today. Vicki, should I add anything else?
You're muted, Vicki, if you're speaking. There you go.
There we go. Is that better? Sorry. There you go. Okay, so hello to everybody, especially anybody in the UK, because this is the warmest day so far this year. So anybody who's still in the office at 5:30 in the evening, thank you. So yeah, my name's Vicki Lucas. I am the Training Development Manager for the Institute for Environmental Analytics. We are part of the University of Reading. I just know how, sorry, I'm just going to get rid of GoToMeeting menu. How do I get rid of the GoToMeeting menu?
Menu, let's see. You can move it to the side, I think.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. Okay, sorry, start again. So let's go back. Okay, so yeah, my name is Vicki Lucas. I am the I work for the University of Reading, and I work for the Institute for Environmental Analytics. Is an entity which a lot of data science, especially on the interface with environmental science, in order to produce novel software, especially for commercial exploitation. And we provide training as part of our remit as well. So I'm going to talk about the work that I carried out within the Belmont Forum and for the Infrastructure and Data Management Group, and that consisted of a number of tasks which culminated in drawing up a curricula. So this is the structure of the talk. I'll do some background information, of which Rowena's already covered quite a lot. I'll talk about the next steps that we went through. First of all was a skills gap analysis, which surveyed about 170 professionals in the area, both environmental scientists and data managers and computer scientists. We gathered all that information together. That we then took the major issues from that to a workshop. We had 25 people at a workshop, again representing publishing, data management, training, and we discussed issues further, which then evolved into a curricula with a bit of extra work. So then I'll talk about the curricula in a bit more detail, its structure, and then I'll go on to talk about another piece of work that I'm doing, which builds on the curricular work that I developed. And then we'll go to some questions, but I'm happy to take questions as we go along. So if somebody wants me to alert me to a question, then please just interrupt. I'm more than happy to interact as we go along. Okay, so this is information that Rowena was just talking about. So the Belmont Forum is a partnership of a variety of organisations, some of which are funders of environmental science around the world. And the overall theme that I took from the Belmont Forum was that it's interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary science, and how can improving that impact positively on global environmental change research. And then for the infrastructure and data management group, a as Rowena says, there's various themes, but the theme that I was leading was action theme 4. So that's the human side of things. What skills would help to improve pursuits which are data intensive global change research? And there was a document produced in 2015 called A Place to Stand. That's a guiding document, and that set out all the things that were required, and that included the development of a curriculum. So this is just a kind of chronological way that we went through things. So we started at the end of 2016. That was with a skills gap survey. As I said, that went out to, we got replies from 170 people. And the skills gap survey summarised what the issues were, but also in that we started to compile a list of recommended training, and that's the graphic on the left is the start of that list. So a wealth of information, especially online information, that people who responded to the survey were aware of and were willing to recommend as good sources of information. We then distilled that into a workshop. The workshop was held as a side meeting at EGU in Vienna in 2017, and we had great participation. We had a day of very full discussion, and then that fed into the actual curricula itself, and the curricula were endorsed by the Belmont Forum at the end of last year. And just to introduce myself, so that's me, I'm the Human Dimensions Champion, and I was supported by the Coordination Office for the Infrastructure and Data Management Group. So that's Rowena, who's on the call today, Bob S'mores and Tina Lee as well. So the skills gap survey, so this, I'll just go through a couple of results. So this was asking people, what's your largest data use challenge? What challenges you when you use data every day? And the top 4 that came out, which were fairly evenly split, were data complexity, finding data, which I hear a lot from my colleagues, a lack of data standards, and data management and other issues around data management, such as storage. So those were some of the themes that we then took to the workshop to discuss further. And this is another result from the survey. And so this is asking the question, what research habits and skills need most improvement? And as you can see there, so top came reluctance to share data or models. And then after that, it's a bit more skills-based, so lack of computational numerical skills, lack of awareness of relevant potential data sources, so that's reflecting the finding data is an issue, and then poor programming style or data analysis workflow. And then, as you can see, we tried to cover a lot of bases. So there was but it came out that there were a lot of people who were generally found a lot of challenges, that, you know, there are a lot of challenges that people face by using large environmental data sets and having to analyse and process and store them. So then we went to the workshop. So this was us brainstorming at the workshop. As I said, we had 25 people attended. They were from environmental science, publishing, the people who actually run data repositories, people from training, and people from data management. And the workshop largely, the outcomes reinforced the findings of the survey. So it did add some detail as well, but there was nothing that appeared to be massively missing from the survey. So this was SGen refining some of the topics. So as you can see there, on the left, we have data discovery, and on the right, we have data complexity as issues that we discussed. So, for example, data complexity, it turns out that people don't, you know, it means different things to different people. So until we actually got to the workshop and started discussing it in a bit more detail, complexity might mean the data itself or how it's labelled. So, as is always the way, you learn a lot more about your survey once you start looking at the results than before you actually write it. So then we went on to look at the actual curricula itself, and the whole remit of Action Theme 4, so the whole remit of the people skills, was about accelerating research in global environmental change. So what skills can you give researchers to improve them and make them more effective at researching global environmental science and global environmental change? And I think 3 issues emerged as the underlying themes to the actual topics themselves. So one is making data handling more efficient, and we'll go into that a bit more in detail, but I think a lot of that is about being a good programmer. Another is a current topic which is discussed much over the last few years, is making the research itself more reproducible. And that's by taking care of your data all the way through the research data life cycle. And then the ease of data sharing. Obviously, we're talking about FAIR as well today. And again, that's a theme that FAIR brings out very well. So those are the underlying goals. But then these are the actual headline modules that comprise the curricula. So there are core modules, there are optional modules, and then there's a distinction for principal investigators themselves. And that's to say that different people have different requirements. So not everybody needs to know everything, but there are some things which are non-negotiable. So I'll just talk about those in a little bit more detail in a moment, but that's the general gist. So for core skills are things like programming, what are the weaknesses and strengths, what do you expect from environmental data, data visualization, data management, and then a newish topic certainly would be for lots of environmental scientists is how do you exchange data in an interdisciplinary manner. Then optional, and some of the optional modules would be, of course, core for some environmental scientists, but I think for most environmental scientists, some of these might be less essential, but things like software development or software engineering ideas, object-oriented coding, which would improve, if you've got very large data sets, could improve the speed of analysis. Some data science topics, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail in a moment, and then data organization. So what do you actually do with your workflow? And then for principal investigators, making them aware of requirements within data management plans, that's the DMPs, and what do repositories require, and then a bit more about how they make up their teams. So a bit more from a management point of view. And I should also say that all of these modules are differing lengths. So the principal investigators might only be an hour or two's briefing, whereas, for example, the core management skill, the core programming skills might be a 5-day course. So core modules. So this is programming for data-intensive research, handling environmental data, visualization, data management, and interdisciplinary data exchange. So I'll just go through some of the topics in those. So for programming for data-intensive research, we'll be talking about things like, so this is not programming from first principles. So this is for people who already program. This is making sure that they program in a more robust way. So this is things like coding standards, version control, commenting code, using libraries, debugging, an introduction to testing, so how to be methodical and modular when you write your code instead of just being a stream of consciousness, possibly parallelization depending on what system you use. So those kind of themes. So not teaching people to program, this is the next step. This is teaching people to program in a good way. Then for the environmental data, so environmental data has many things which are interesting. So on top of things like uncertainties and errors, what do you do about spatial data? What do you do about missing data? What do you do about cleaning data? How do you combine data sets from different sources? So you might have a point value of one thing versus an area value of another. So it's those, what do you actually do with your data in a sensible way? And a lot of environmental data is about context. So you need to know a bit about your subject before you start making judgments on your data. Then thirdly, so I've got a picture there of John. He's our Chief Technical Officer at the IEA. One of his passions is data visualization. So that's the third module, is visualizing environmental data. So visualizing doesn't just mean producing plots for a presentation. So visualizing comprises what do you do about visualizing for your data, for your own data analysis? How does that differ to how you might visualize something for a research paper, and how you might visualize something to convey to other audiences? So there's no one size fits all for a plot, and it's important for getting information across that you are careful with your visualization and that you do your visualization in a reproducible manner as well. So then we go on to data management. So data management obviously is a vast topic in itself, but lots of things to cover there. And I should say that action theme 2 as part of the e-infrastructure and data management project deals a lot with data management. So this is just reflecting some of the work that they've done, but it's things like producing and sensibly using a data management plan. What do journals require? What do funders require? How do you actually organize your data? So the practicalities of it, citing and publishing data, data security, data ethics, how do you share sensibly? Obviously metadata comes into this throughout. So every aspect of data management, and I'll come back to this in a minute, but I think the thing with data management especially is actually getting people to do it as opposed to paying lip service to it. And then finally, something which is probably slightly more unusual, but interdisciplinary data exchange. So how are you as an environmental scientist going to sensibly exchange your data with somebody from another domain? So that might be an ecologist or a social scientist. So what is it you need to be able to talk about sensibly together in order to break down the barriers so that you can use each other's data without making mistakes? So that would be more about having workshops so that people can actually talk to each other. And we'll talk more on format in a minute, but it's that, putting people from different domains in the same room so that they can have sensible discussions about what they understand by different vocabularies, for example. Okay, so those are the 5 core modules, and those are for people at the sort of PhD to early career researcher kind of level in their career. And then we go on to the optional modules. So there you go for you.
Hi, before we move on, we actually have a question. I'm glad you distinguished, you mentioned mid-career versus early career, because we have a question on do these modules distinguish between young researchers and more experienced researchers? So a little detail on that would be great.
Yes, so I mean, I think that the core modules would be for most people completing a PhD. Again, I realise that I realise PhD students have a lot to actually get through to do their PhD, but I would say at least the first 4. Interdisciplinary might be more debatable, but certainly PhD level, that you should be able to do 1 to 4 definitely, and you should be striving to do number 5. And then for the optional, which we'll come on to, then that's again might be for PhD students depending on the topic that they're pursuing, but might be for early career researchers or even mid-career researchers. And I suppose I should make that point as well. I suppose that's the thing about producing a curriculum, is that people can compare themselves against it. So I don't doubt that there are people who are mid-career researchers who may not program in the most effective way. I'll probably mention this again, but I have a colleague of mine is a software engineer by training. She then went into environmental science. She does a lot of training for me, specifically on improving programming skills. And she spends a lot of her time rewriting code that academics have written to make it more robust. So ideally, all these things get done at the beginning, but nevertheless, it's not a bad checklist for anybody in their research career. So I'll go on to the optional modules. So this is more on the whole software engineering type approach. So more on software development. So that means things like requirements capture, design methodologies, diagramming. So it's that whole planning thing. And I think that is something that scientists may not always do very well. It's the planning, what do I want from the end of this before I actually start writing stuff? And I know lots of research scientists can be sort of skeptical because they spend so much time just, testing this thing, and then move on. But nevertheless, at least having the knowledge that you need to be able to plan something in a structured way before you start it, certainly if you're going to turn it into anything vaguely operational, needs to be done from the beginning. Then object-oriented programming, that's obviously a useful thing to be able to do if you've got, especially if you've got some large data sets to manipulate. And then what I've called data science topics. So I think this is a useful distinction between research data science and data-intensive environmental science. So data-intensive environmental science, somebody might use machine learning, or they might need relational databases training. That's true. But I think a lot of environmental scientists at the moment, those would be optional topics to kind of widen their whole view in the area, that they wouldn't be core. These are other tools that you might want to use in the future. So there's a list of data science type topics that cater for that. And that might change in the future. You know, machine learning, I suspect, will become more and more usual for people to do. And then there's things on, again, it's about being more organized, so about your workflow, and then some advanced things on code sharing, so things like Jupyter notebooks. And then the pictures on the left, so I'm glad Hugh's on the call, because I went along to the Research Data Science Summer School last summer that was held in Italy by Hugh and Simon, etc. And it was great to go to it. It's great to see a massive amount of stuff taught in a couple of weeks. Visualization was there. It was taught in R, so I got to learn R, which was a surprise to me. Lots of visualization, yeah, and a lot on machine learning as well. So yeah, it was a great experience. And then, so this is then the third section. So we've got five modules on core. We've got 4 modules for optional, and then 2 modules which are a lot shorter. These would just be an hour or two's briefings, and these are to principal investigators. So the first is about encouraging principal investigators to prioritise data management. So it's talking about what funders require, keeping your data management plans up to date, and resourcing things. So resourcing data management as part of the whole structure of the project, that it's not an afterthought. And then something which came up very strongly, especially at the workshop, but it has come up on a number of occasions while doing all of this work, is 2 things. One is the idea of a hybrid scientist. So this is somebody who supports the research scientist doing the environmental science, but who has different skills. And those could well be more of a straight computer science or software engineering type skills. So, for example, people who might write libraries that an environmental scientist might use to do analysis. So it's recognizing that. So this would be a briefing to help principal investigators realize that they might want these people in their teams. They might need these people in their teams. It's recognizing that there are some skills which are truly specialist, and you might want to go to somebody who's already been trained in it rather than try and do it yourself. You know, sometimes that's acknowledged for things like statistics, that you may go and consult somebody else to get the right statistics for your project. Well, the same with software engineering. And then the other thing is how to recognize these people. And I know that other people have done work on this, but it's just to point out to principal investigators that there are a whole host of people who might be involved. When you get to very data intensive activities, might be a whole host of people who wouldn't normally appear on papers. And how do they get recognized, especially in kind of a workplace? So these are definitely more management type roles, skills that we're trying to get across there. So those are all of the actual core, all of the actual modules. So does anybody want to ask any questions on those? Okay, we'll go on to a bit more on context. So because this came out so strongly at the workshop, there were a few things, but I'm just going to dwell on 2 of them here. So one is the format of delivery, and then the other is existing training, which is obviously the existing training is a nice discussion to have in this forum. So on the topic of delivery, there was obviously a very strong feeling in the room, which is true of all adult learning. You know, adults are a lot more driven by what's in it for me. And that came across. So things like it needs to be convenient. So you might want face-to-face training, you know, at the same time as AGU, so that you get the maximum number of people there, ease of attending, etc. So emphasize the benefits, use real life examples, maybe online, that might be more convenient for a lot of people. But I'll just go back to the interdisciplinary, but obviously there are some benefits to putting people in the same room together. So not everything can be online. I'm a big fan of online, but not for everything. So that's another thing. So that came out. So delivery, how you deliver these things are also important, because ultimately, and I spend my whole life doing this, but getting people to come to courses is a thing. You know, that's attracting people, making it convenient enough for them, and so that they can definitely see from the start what they're going to get out of it, and that they want that thing is really important. And then talking about existing training. So a lot of the discussion on that was that there's a lot of data management training out there, and that's true. I mean, there's a lot of online data, really good stuff. So this is where I come back to I mentioned this before. So this is where it's then a question of just culture and general education to get people to use the existing information. So it's all very well having these fantastic resources. It's that how do we encourage people to take that step to actually engage with it and then make it part of their everyday work. So lots of existing stuff on data management. So the things that there weren't much on that were identified in the curricula. So the PI training, I doubt, I'm not aware that is out there. Again, the interdisciplinary things, so actually getting people together. And then environmental data. I think the environmental data is the kind of thing that people would learn as you go along during your PhD, or even partly in your undergraduate, but certainly during your PhD. But maybe just having it as a more formal course would just cut some time for some people, that you just cut to the chase and start talking from the beginning about what it is about environmental data that's difficult. Okay, so that's some of the context. And now then finally, I'm just going to round off by talking about a course that I'm currently developing. So this is a course, ironically, also funded by NERC, so Natural Environment Research Council of the UK. While I was completing the write-up of the curriculum, they put out a call for some data management training for early career researchers and PhD students in environmental science. So I won the funding, and I'm now in the middle of producing an online course that will launch in a couple of months' time. It's about 20 hours of content, and it's funded by the National Productivity Investment Fund. So this is the UK government saying, we think data management is a way to making people more efficient in their work. So that's where the money actually came from for this. And just the detail at the bottom there. So it's in 8 modules. The one thing it made me reflect on with the curriculum was that I separated data management into 3 things. So whereas in the curriculum, I'd kind of just lumped them all together into data management, I've picked them out as firstly context. So that's things like open data. So we've got Susanna Assunta-Sinone from OERC. She's talking about FAIR. She deals with the FAIR principles all the time. So she's contributed a video on FAIR. We talked to a publisher. We're talking to a variety of people. So it's that bigger picture stuff for the context. Then the second module is practicalities. That's actually, what do I do? How do I write a data management plan? How do I look after my physical samples? How do I look after my data day to day? And then thirdly, we go on to the NERC stuff. So NERC has its own data centres in the UK. There's about 5 of them. And it's about how do you interact with those data centres. So that's all the data management stuff. Then in the middle, we've got some data application. So the variability is a bit on statistics. And then we've got John, as I pictured earlier in the presentation, talking about data visualization. And then, and this came from the funding call, so it wasn't just data management, there was a very strong steer towards and how does academia get its data and research out to other people. I will inform you when the course is available. It will launch in June. You can sign up now. So the web address is actually there. So it's www.datatree, all one word, .org.uk. And I've also got a Twitter account. Please follow me on Twitter. you can sign up now and you can follow the course as of June. So the end users, and this is another thing, when you're communicating with people, there is no one size fits all. So there are three, we've separated it into three. One is for policymakers, one is for business people, and then the final one is for media and public. And we have people who are leading the modules who are professionals in all 8 of these areas. So yeah, it's a busy time, but we're getting there. So we'll just round off. So I'll just go back to the goals. So this is, these are my thoughts behind all of these things. So how do we make environment, data intensive digital skills for data intensive environmental research? How do we improve those? And I think the 3 underlying things being more efficient in your data handling, and that essentially results in programming, so moving away from spreadsheets but actually programming. And I know that my software engineering colleague would say that I shouldn't say programming, I should say development, because programming might imply just knowing the syntax of a language. So anyway, some sort of good practice in coding skills, making research more producible, and easing data sharing, and that includes to other disciplines. So that means understanding the words that different disciplines use and if they have specific meanings, and just going through that whole process. So I'm done. If anybody would like to ask any questions, I'll be happy to answer. And anybody's welcome to get in touch with me directly. If anybody wants to email me directly, then you're welcome to do that.
And your address is on the bottom of this slide, right, Vicki?
That's right.
Lucas at, right? Yeah, and Rowena also put in a link to the course at Data Tree. So,
thank you.
Yep. Any questions? Is someone trying to ask a question, or that's background? Must be background. Okay, well, that sounds good. Thank you, Vicki. That was excellent. I mean, lots of good information there very quickly. Lots of opportunity to discuss this a little bit later too, which would be great. So I want to keep us close to time. What we've got on the agenda again now is to just talk very briefly about the data management training clearinghouse and how it could be used, and then there'll be time for group discussion. So what I'd like to do is just run through the clearinghouse for just a few minutes to give people a background about what it is, but also the context for this is that one of the things that the clearinghouse does, or the main reason that clearinghouse exists, is in order to pull together resources about research data management from all kinds of disciplines and make them searchable in, quote unquote, one place. So it's and the mechanism that we will be using to do that is a metadata scheme that is also aligned with schema.org, in the theory that if people search for different kinds of resources on research data management, they would be able to find these with the metadata that's in the clearinghouse. So it's possible to find them, but also one of the things we're doing with the clearinghouse, and I'll show you how we're doing this, is to be able to associate different kinds of courses to not just courses, but educational resources more broadly to various kind of pathfinders or frameworks. And so when we were talking about the data skills curricula framework, it seemed as if this might be a really nice way to put things into the clearinghouse and associate all of them with that data skills curriculum framework, so that people can, if they're looking for skills that meet the expectations or goals of the data skills curricula framework, then that's one place that they could come to too. The clearinghouse is one place to come to too and find them. So I'll just show you very briefly what the clearinghouse is. It's a collaborative registry really of metadata about educational resources related to research data management very, very broadly. And this is the home page for it. It was initially started with seed money from the U.S. Geological Survey's Community for Data Integration, Earth Sciences Information Partnership, and Data One. So there are, it's fairly simple. At this point, we've just got functions that are search, browse, and submit. And what I will do is show you quickly what we've got in the search environment. These are faceted searches that you can look for.
Are you trying to show something on the screen?
We can't see your screen.
Oh, you can't. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Changing the presenter, that's part of the deal, isn't it? Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. There. Now can you see?
Yes, we can.
All right.
Yes,
Apologies. Glad somebody spoke up. So this is the main site for the clearinghouse. I've got the address a little bit later on, but you can also just search for a DMT clearinghouse and find it. These are the functions: the search, browse, and submit. And what I was going to show you is the search, so that they're faceted searching. You can see these on the side, the different filters: framework, keywords, organizations, people, and publication date, license, and cost. So I won't go into all of the metadata that's part of it. The important thing here are two things, I think, in terms of these filters. One is this framework that it's possible to search by these, and if you enter a search, you can find, for instance, all of the resources that are part of the ICSU World Data System training resources guide that they have pulled together. So this is a list of 65 different courses or modules or tutorials that are all kind of have been pulled together as being important for research data management from the point of view of the World Data System. So this kind of thing is what we think we could do with the data skills curricula. So whenever people either have existing resources that they would like to submit that would map to that framework, that's the kind of information that we can put that together as we put the resources into the clearinghouse. So that's it briefly. I think the other thing I wanted to mention is that there are aspects. The other thing you can do is add keywords that are, more specific to different frameworks. So if we have an overall approach, that's the data skills curricula framework, there could be specific keywords that could be associated with that as well. And an example of how we did this is what you can see here. We have added the core trustworthy data repositories categories and that the WDS and ICSU has associated with each of the resources that are in their resource guide. They've got, data reuse is one of the categories. So if we're just looking for resources that map to that have keywords associated with that particular keyword, then you can pull up all of those, 32 of them in this case, that have been associated with that. So that's those two mechanisms are ways that we think we could share educational resources that are associated with the data skills framework. I won't go into, the only other thing to mention very briefly, I think, about the clearinghouse is that the way to submit the resources is there's an easy way and then one that's a little bit more involved if you're interested in actually helping to do the creation of the metadata. So this first screen, if you're not logged in, you can just submit title, the URL, whether there's a fee with the resource or not, and then your information, name and contact email address, so that as we add if we have questions about the resource as it's been added to the clearinghouse, we can get back to you and ask specific questions or ask for corrections or ask you to check it. And then if you're interested, and we're always looking for people who are interested in helping with this, you can become a submitter yourself and then add the other kind of information that's in these different these categories: the recommended information, which is more about the people who are involved, authors, contributors of different types, and so on, as well as more descriptive information that here are the keywords, here are the licenses, that kind of thing can be added as well. And then the information context, where you talk about target audience, and here's where you would associate the framework, other kinds of information there. So both of those are available, but the easiest one that is to drop something into here, into this first screen. So I think that's probably all I will mention now with it. If anybody has any questions, happy to discuss it, answer them. Otherwise, we can open it up for questions. Questions about the clearinghouse, and if not, we'll move to broaden it. Anything about the clearinghouse right now? Okay, I see. Okay, so I have a question about defining a framework in this context. Okay, from Ian Carroll, yes. So we use the term framework for this concept because it's one that is used by this educational metadata scheme that we're using, which is the Learning Resource Metadata Initiative. The LRMI schema is one that is endorsed by Dublin Core and maintained by Dublin Core, and it was initiated, it started with people who are educators, professional educators who have the vocabulary that that they wanted to apply for the schema. So framework in this context is that, but is also a way, we've adapted a little bit as a way to, in some ways, provide almost collections of resources that can be pulled together. So USGS, United States Geological Survey, has a number of courses that they create, and they have an approach that they give to their researchers about the different steps of a research life cycle. So you can also see, as I'm showing you here on the screen, in this particular one we're seeing right now are the steps of that framework. We also have the Data One life cycle, the Digital Curation Center has a life cycle. If you've got courses that you're creating and want to associate with the different steps of that framework, you can do that as well. So that is what we're doing. It's kind of an adaptation of an educational framework. So for instance, in the United States, if courses follow the core science framework or some something that is coming from kind of an organization that's monitoring or endorsing different courses according to this approach, this way of looking at the courses, that's what we're trying to do. So hopefully that answers that question. Easy enough to add those as well, if that's something that can't be done by anyone just coming in. It's something that we're doing as part of a kind of an editorial review process within the clearinghouse, which again, we're looking for people who are interested in doing this as well. So so the clearinghouse has been going on since October of 2016. We've got about 180 resources in now that don't sound like a lot, but are very focused on research data management from a number of different disciplines. And that's actually one of the other things that's really useful, I think, about the clearinghouse is you can really tailor the resources to specific data formats. For instance, we've got some categories for ocean data and marine data and agriculture data and so on, but also to different disciplines, subject disciplines as well. So. And a follow-up question, does the submission have to subscribe to a framework? No, it does not. You can submit something that doesn't have to be associated. So, anything else? Okay, well, if there is another question comes up, go ahead and put it into the chat, or just ask the question. What we want to do now, I think, is find the agenda again, and then just open it to group discussion about either about the curricula, the curricula framework, how it would be implemented, other kinds of topics. And I'm Nancy. Vicky and Rowena and I can have questions if there's nothing that anybody has from the audience, but we'd be very happy to hear what other issues people want to talk about.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Vicky. Oh, please, go ahead.
Okay, you can go ahead. Hi. So this is Imme Ebert-Uphoff from Colorado State University. I had a question mainly for Vicky, probably. What's the best way to find out everything I can about the curriculum that you're describing? Because we're trying to write a review paper on interdisciplinary education and geosciences and data science. And so we want to make sure we include everything that's relevant, and anything that anybody can point me to would also be helpful. We already have a lot of material, but we always are interested in including more.
Absolutely, thank you very much. So all of the reports are available from the Belmont Forum e-infrastructure and data management website. And I'm happy for the PowerPoint to be circulated. And I've written notes with the PowerPoint, which has all the web addresses to links in them. So there's all the material is all linkable from the PowerPoint as well. So yeah, I'm happy for that to be shared.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll give a bit of a follow-up to that answer. I will circulate the actual outline of the curricula framework, but one of the places where we are right now is we have this framework, and right now there are a lot of possibilities to kind of adapt it to one's own research needs. There are a lot of paths one can take within the framework that has been put forth. So I think that is why one of the reasons that I'm excited about the data management training clearinghouse as a resource to help people who are experiencing capacity building needs or want to explore the options, where they can come and, you know, if people want to adopt the framework, they can use the clearinghouse to kind of see, this option from Data One would really suit what we're trying to accomplish within you know, setting up a simple data management plan, or and it can kind of be built on and layered. So, but if you want to engage, Emma, further, please email Nancy or myself or Vicky, and we'll be happy to follow up with you.
Great, I think I'll do that.
I see we have a question from Jake Carlson. Jake, did you want to ask it yourself, or should I could go ahead and ask it? Jake says, you mentioned, Vicky, you mentioned that finding data was a strong concern of the people you surveyed. Where and how is finding data incorporated into the curriculum that you discussed?
Yeah, so we discussed that a lot at the workshop, and so metadata features a lot in different parts of the curriculum. So it's kind of distributed. I mean, there are people I work with. Oh, and research objects as well. So there are ways to address that. So it's kind of more rather than being a theme in itself, it's that it features there. That's how you would share, and that's, you know, and how you would make it more available. So persistent identifiers, etc., that kind of thing. It all features as kind of subsections of each module.
We also have a comment that asks or suggests a follow-up discussion on tailoring these resources for different research communities. So for example, EarthCube. So that's definitely something that we've talked about doing within the clearinghouse, but that it's somewhat of a limited way to do that there, unless the resources are already present, of course, or existent. But that's definitely a topic we could have at another time. As we mentioned at the very beginning, one of the things we're interested in doing with this particular webinar is to identify topics where people can come on and we can really discuss things in a venue like that. So that's definitely a good topic to take forward. So thank you for that.
This is Alicia. I might expand on that a little bit if that's.
Oh, great. Yes, please.
So I think one of the really interesting things about this, and thank you everybody for sort of running this and providing some slides afterwards. I think that there's this sort of concept of providing training, but then actually, and Vicki sort of brought this up, actually getting people to use the training effectively and sort of that culture change. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to be talking during the all hands meeting for EarthCube, which some people maybe know about, maybe don't, in terms of like how you actually sort of get scientists to make that cultural change to the point where it's really is open data and open sharing. I think the tools are part of it, and this is fantastic, but then there's also tailoring it in such a way and then changing the culture so that they're sort of more inclined to actually use the resources.
Right. Another thing, Alicia, is to keep in mind is one of the things we just finished with AGU, American Geophysical Union abstracts were all due yesterday. So Rowena and I have submitted a proposal to do that, actually talk about how people can tailor to different disciplines. So keep that in mind. That might be a place that if with what you've done, you might want to share that the broader view with AGU too. So we may get back in touch with you if that's to reprise your presentation at EarthCube, but think about that because that's definitely an interest of many people. So great.
Yeah, that's great, and it's definitely one of the things that like AAAS is supporting and stuff too. So I'd be happy to have that longer conversation.
Great,
sure.
Great, thank you.
That's great, Alicia. Thank you for bringing that up. And one of the I think you touched on one of the broader issues that is a constant struggle, the idea of a culture change, and that's within institutions and data producers and data users. And I think that's another reason why why I'm excited about this curricula framework, because it does give the chance to kind of penetrate individual, its adaptability gives it a chance to kind of achieve individual yet common sensibilities, if you will. And the more resources that are put into the clearinghouse, the broader and more options there are for people to really see what's out there and see that other agencies, other institutions are kind of moving in the same direction, and the more opportunities for convergence on these points of training. Does anybody have any other thoughts or questions?
What we may want to do in terms of continuing this discussion is if people have ideas that that would like to discuss, this document, this Google document will be up, but the link will still be live. And if you're interested in adding topics, we can just put notes at the bottom that suggest a place where you could put your suggestions in, and we can take them forward, and maybe people to invite. Put the topic in. We can put a little table, kind of like we did with the presentations, of say, what the topic would be and who you are, and whether you'd want to be contacted or not to continue the discussions. But this venue of the webinar kind of approach is something that the ESIP Federation supports quite well, and so we can have different kinds of webinars and discussions like this possible. And there should be mechanisms soon for having more people on than we were able to have today. Apologies for if people were not able to get on and are listening in some other way, but that's the thought too, to provide opportunities for further discussion. So there's also the Data Management Training Working Group through ESIP has a listserv that we can use as well. I've got that here that's at the top if you're interested in joining that, where some of these discussions can happen. That would also be great. So we can add that table at the end here if you want to add anything else. So because we're getting very close. It looks like it's on the half hour from my computer's clock. So any final questions or any final comments anybody has? I think there's no doubt they will give us permission. Okay. Well, thank you very much, and thanks very much to Vicki and Rowena for helping to organize, and Vicki for her excellent presentation. We'll definitely love to share the slides. We'll also send out a link to this recording as well. So if there's nothing else, thank you. Oh, I see one more question, Alicia, about a Slack channel. We don't have one right now, but we certainly can. That's a good idea. So we will look into that. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you again.
Thanks, Rowena. Thanks, Vicki.